B'az Hashem Mizbach, we begin Perek Shnei Asa, the 12th Perek in the Hilchos Issurei, the laws of forbidden relationships in the Sefer Kedusha, the laws of sanctity, which up until now in the previous Prakim we were discussing the laws of forbidden relationships with Jewish men and women. And in this Perek, the Rambam discusses how it relates to that of other nations. Which in this Perek we discuss that of a non-Jewish woman, a maidservant, and regarding bringing other peoples as converts into the Jewish people. As the Rambam opens up in Halacha Aleph regarding a Yisrael Shabal Goya, if a Jewish man has relations with a non-Jewish woman, Mishar Umas from the other nations, which important to note is the Rambam's opinion is that the Isser of Hischasnus, of getting married, is by all nations before they convert, which many Rishonim disagree with the Rambam. They hold that no, only by the Sheva Umais, the 7 nations that were in Eretz Yisrael before the Jews, people with Yeshua conquered it, they were forbidden to get married with them even when they converted. Because before conversion, there's no halach of chitna at all, because Kedushin is not taifis in a non-Jew. And from this it comes out that by other nations, it wouldn't be applicable to have chitna at all, because after they convert, they're like Jewish, and beforehand, it doesn't apply as chasnus. But the Rambam disagrees, and he holds that if a Jewish man has a relation with a non-Jewish woman from the other nations of the world, derech ishas, through that of marriage, or a Jewish woman has relations with a non-Jewish man through a relationship of marriage, they get lashes biblically if they get warned. It says in the pasuk, that you shouldn't intermarry with the non-Jewish people, which Rambam is explaining this when they're not Jewish, not when they convert, through marriage, as Rambam explains later on. And therefore the Rambam brings the end of the pasuk, your daughter you should not give it to his son, and his daughter you shouldn't take for your son, because this is qualifying like this bam, which the Rambam understands is when they're not Jewish, is the problem about intermarrying. And echat shiva amamin, and whether we're talking about the Sheba Umais, which everyone agrees the pasuk is talking about the 7 nations of Canaan, or whether all nations of the world, they're all forbidden, all the rest of the nations beside the Jewish people, you have this Isser of Leisid Chatnbam. And the Chemah of the Ezra is so explicit through Ezra Sefer, which although this pasuk in Sefer Nehemiah, but the Rambam calls it Sefer Ezra because that includes Sefer Nehemiah. It says in the pasuk in Nehemiah, that we don't give our daughters to the nations of the land, and their daughters we don't take for our sons. Now, the Torah only made it forbidden through a way of marriage. But if a Jewish man has a relation with a non-Jewish woman through a promiscuous, unmarried way, then then we give him lashes, the rebellious lashes, which are rabbinic. And that's a rabbinic concern, because if we allow relations, it might cause to obviously bring about marriage, which is the biblical prohibition. Now, it not only does he have relations with the non-Jewish woman, so he's not getting married, so he doesn't want to violate the biblical violation, but he designates hard to have unmarried relationships, which this was, the Rambam is going to quote the Gezerah of the courts of the Chashmonaim, that a Jewish man who has a relation with a non-Jewish woman, he's liable for what's called Nashgaz, which stands for Nida, Shivcha, Goya, and Zaina, which the Gemara's conclusion, according to the Rambam's Girsa, is specifically when she's designated for him. Then Chayv Alem Shom, Nida, he's liable on her because of the halacha of Nida, which is if a Jewish man gets used to this, and he'll have a relation with her even in her menstrual state, he might come to have such relationship with a non-Jewish woman, and all these things are atu, because what it might bring about. And because of having a halachic violation of that of a maidservant, which is also biblically violated if she was an actual shivcha. Because of the problem about non-Jewish woman, because of as a prostitute. Now, but if he didn't designate her for him, Mikra rather just happened to have had relations with her, in the Chayv Mishum Goya, then the only liability is because of her being a non-Jewish woman. But says the Rambam, anyway, all these liabilities that we're holding him responsible for, the whole Nashgaz, is only rabbinically. But the rabbis, the court of the Chashmonaim, they made this gezerah of having relationships with the non-Jewish women. Now, halacha gimel, when do we say this? If the Jewish man was a non-Kohen. But if he's a Kohen having a relation with a non-Jewish woman, then look him in that Torah. Then his lashes are actually biblical mishum zayna, because she's considered a prostitute. It doesn't make a difference if she's a zayna as a Jewish woman or of a non-Jewish woman. And but he only gets lashes not by marrying her, but by having relations with her, Shar'in Bas Kedushin, because she can't have Kedushin because she's a non-Jewish woman. Because in contrast, a Kohen that has relations with a Zaina that's a Jewish woman through his nuz, then actually there the lashes is not because of Zaina, it's only when he actually marries her and has Biah, as the Rambam says in Perek Yizan Loch Beis. But he would get lashes for Loisi Kadesha because not less than that of a Jewish. But what he's saying here is the Be'ila, here by the non-Jewish woman, the Zaina, she's going to be qualified here for the Kohen as a biblical violation because the Kohen is forbidden to have relations with that of a Zaina. Halacha Dal Ram continues with the halacha of Kanon Poigim Boy and the stringency of intermarriage and of getting mixed up with the nations of the world. Says the Ram, Kalaboyel Goya. Whoever has relations with a non-Jewish woman, being their chasnas, whether through marriage, being their chasnas, whether just having an extramarital relationship, in Ba'ala B'Fahesya, if he has relations with her out in the open, and that is that he's having relations with her in front of 10 Jewish men or more. In Pogabay Kanon Varagu, if Kanon zealots go ahead and strike him and they kill him, there's reason they're praiseworthy and they're diligent people. But this halacha, a tradition from Moshe from Sinai, and a proof to this is Maisa Pinchas Zimri, the story with Pinchas that he killed Zimri, who was having a relation with a non-Jewish woman, and he was the Kanoi Pinchas, and he killed Zimri. Now, halacha Rambam qualifies. It says, now, the zealot is not permitted to harm this man having a relation with a non-Jewish woman, El B'Shas Maisa, Kizimri, only during the act of the intercourse, like it was by Zimri. Like it says in the Pasuk Midbar, that when Pinchas killed the two of them, that when he was killing Zimri, he killed the woman to her stomach because they were in the act at that point. Of them perish. But the moment that the Jewish man removes himself, in Hargan I say, now kill him. And if Pinchas or whoever the zealot would be would kill him, he would be executed for having killed the Jewish man. Now, if the zealot is coming to court to get permission to say, look what he's doing, he wants to have permission to kill him, we don't rule him, we don't direct him to do that. Even though it's during the act, it's only a halacha that a kanoi is allowed to, but we don't tell him to do it. But not only that, if the zealot is coming to kill the man who's having relations, and the one who's having relations with the non-Jewish woman removes himself, meaning even though he's in the middle of the act which the kanoi is allowed to kill him, but in self-defense, the boil goes and kills the kanoi to save himself, the one who's committing this act of Biah on the non-Jewish woman will not get executed for having killed himself in self-defense, because again, halacha doesn't mandate it, and therefore he could defend himself. It's just that the kanoi is allowed to. Now, this was all regarding a non-Jewish woman. But if a man has relations with the daughter of a ger Toshav, which a ger Toshav is the resident convert who is not a regular ger tzaddik, he did not convert to Judaism, he accepted not to do idol worship and all the other Shev Mitzvah B'nai Nayach, but he didn't circumcise or immerse himself in the mikvah. And that's why he's called ger Toshav, because, as Rambam says later on, Perek Yidal, that he's allowed to reside amongst the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael. Now, Bas Ger Toshav doesn't literally mean to say the daughter of a ger Toshav, it means to say the woman herself accepted not to worship idolatry. Then in a kanon poigimai, so although she's not a Jewish woman, but the zealots are not allowed to harm that man. But again, for committing this act, we give him rabbinic lashes. Halachavav, let's say the zealots did not harm him, and the courts did not give him lashes for what he had done. So then his punishment is explicit in the words of Tanakh, in the Ksuba, in the words of the Navi, Shu B'Karos, which his life is going to get cut short. Like it says in the pasuk, Ki chilil Yehuda kodesh Hashem, because Judea has desecrated the holy things of Hashem. Asher ohev abal bas el necher, that he loved and he cohabited with the daughter of the foreign god. Yachras Hashem leish asher yasen, Hashem should cut off. This says the Karos to the man that has done such a thing. Ervaina, any progeny, any descendants, like it says in Sefer Malachi. Which tells us in Yisrael, who if he's a regular Yisrael, he's not going to have any progeny amongst the sages of Tamidim, no descendants amongst the students. If he's a Kayin, he's not going to have, like the pasuk says, Magish Mincha Hashem Tzavakas, to bring the flower offerings to Hashem, the Lord of Hosts. What you learn from this, if a man's relations with a non-Jewish woman, it's as if he had got married to the idol. Like it says in the pasuk, Uval Bas El Necher, that he had relations with the daughter of the foreign god, Benikra, and he's called like the pasuk Mechal Kadesh Hashem, desecrating the holy things of Hashem. Halacha Zayin. The Rambam qualifies, says, Oven said this sin, Although there's no capital punishment for it, that should not make it light in your eyes having relations with a non-Jewish woman. Actually, this is such a loss that having relations with all the forbidden relationships are not equivalent for how bad this is. Because if someone has a child from a woman that's forbidden to him biblically as an erva, but it's still his son for all halachic purposes, he's considered a Jewish man, although he's considered an illegitimate child. But a son from a non-Jewish woman is not his son, like it says in the pasuk, where you're going to remove your son from after me, where he's going to remove him from being after Hashem because it takes on that of the status of the mother, which is a non-Jewish woman. So that's very severe. As Rambam says, this actually causes to cling to the non-Jews, to the nations of the world, where Hashem has separated us from them. It's going to make us turn away from after Hashem and to betray Him, and therefore it is very severe. Now, halacha tes, the Rambam qualifies now from the perspective of the non-Jew who's having relations with the Jew. If a non-Jewish man has a relation with a Jewish woman, if she's a married woman, he gets executed. If she's single, it doesn't get executed. Which again, because Eishes Ish is forbidden to them too, and therefore gets executed, but only if she's married. Halachiyut. But if a Jew has a relation with a non-Jewish woman, now even if the non-Jewish woman is just over 3 years old, whether she's adult or whether she's single, whether she's a married woman, even if the Jewish man is only a minor himself, well, he's not going to get executed, but he's over 9 years old, so his Biah is considered the equivalent of an act of cohabitation. Since he deliberately had a relation with a non-Jewish woman, she actually gets executed because of that 10-year-old boy, let's say, because a stumbling block has been caused to a Jewish man because of her, like the halacha is by the animal, where you execute the animal, even though what did the animal do? Same thing over here. But there was in the first time, this explicit in the Torah, like it says in the pasuk in the Midbar, behold, it was because of the advice of Bilam that happened to the Jewish men, where they sinned with the women of the nations of the world. And therefore, any woman who knows to have relations with a male, should be killed, meaning because they caused the stumbling block. So you see that caused them to be executed. Now, the Rambam continues regarding the status of the non-Jews as when it's like in this quasi-state, that of the non-Jewish slave. The non-Jewish slave that was immersed to be a Jewish slave, where the halach is and they accepted upon themselves the commandments that slaves are obligated, which is whatever women are obligated in. So they're in this quasi-state, not considered as non-Jewish nation anymore, but they have not yet come to be the full-fledged status of a Jewish person. So a maidservant is forbidden to a regular Jewish man, a free man. And the Rambam picks specifically Ben Chayrin, because as we'll see, there is an exception regarding the Ebed Ivri. But for a regular free Jewish man, it's forbidden to have relations with the maidservant, whether it's his own maidservant, whether it's his friend's maidservant. But if a man's relations with the maidservant, it's only rabbinically that we give him lashes. Because it's explicit in the Torah that the master is allowed to give his female non-Jewish maidservant to his Jewish slave. And she's permitted to him, because if it would have been biblically forbidden, then the master would not be able to give a shevach to his Jewish slave as a wife. So like it says in the pasuk in Shemaish, if his master gives him a woman, which is his maidservant. So obviously biblically it's permitted, biblically it's forbidden, but as the Ram says in the sages did not make a decree regarding the Ebed Ivri. But a regular Jewish man, they did, and therefore a regular Jewish man gets malkas, or makas mardis, to have a relation with the maidservant. But Torah malkas, the Torah did not make any liability of lashes. B'shivcha by maidservant, it's only rabbinic. When is it biblical? Only if she was half a shivcha, half a baschar, that was engaged in Ebed Ivri, like we explained in Perek Gimel, Halacha Yud Gimel. Only then would it be biblical. Now, Halacha Yud Gimel, here also, like we said regarding the non-Jewish woman, says Ramal Yehi Oven Zekal Beinecha. This sin should not be light in your eyes. That doesn't even have biblical lashes by having relation with the non-Jewish maidservant. Because this also causes the son to stray from after being after Hashem. Because the son from the maidservant is a slave. The enemy is not a full-fledged Jew, because it takes after the mother. That caused that the holy seed from the Jewish man should be desecrated and to be like a slave. As the Rambam says, Hare Unkel is Hamatargim. Unkel is that translates into Aramaic the Torah. He was called Be'ilas Eved V'Shivcha. He included the relations with a slave and a maidservant, B'chlal lo yikadosh b'leisi kadesha, not to be a kaddish or kadesha, which the Rambam doesn't totally agree with Unkel is, that the lav of li kaddish b'lei kadesha, which is the male and female idea of having someone that's forbidden to have a relationship with, Unkel is saying is having a relationship with a slave or a maidservant, which are not fully Jewish. According to Rambam, it's only, like he said, rabbinic, but he is relying on what Unkel is showing, that you see Kodesh HaKadosh is talking about Eber Shivcha as a proof that obviously a Jew that's born Eber Shivcha is causing that his seed should be desecrated amongst the nations of the world. Halach Yadal, Habal Shivcha, if a man has relations with a maidservant, even out in the open and even at a time of sin, in the Kohen Pagim Bay. Here, the zealots are not allowed to harm him, and it's not considered the same thing, the equivalent of a regular non-Jewish woman. So if he gets engaged to a maidservant through marriage, in the Likman Torah, he doesn't biblically get lashes. Because the moment that the maidservant immerses herself in the mikveh and accepts mitzvahs, again, like we said, she's not included in the category anymore of the nations. She's not a full-fledged Jewess either, but she doesn't have that halachic status as the goyim. Halachat Ezvav. Nis'arav Vlad Yisrael's Bavad Shavcha. What happens if a Jewish child gets mixed up with a child of a slave woman? So both of them are doubt. We don't know what the status is. And therefore each one of them is doubtfully a slave. So in that situation, they force the master of the maidservant because of they're not going to be able to get married and have children because either one can't marry neither Shivcha Bas Chayin because he might be either an Eved or Ben Chayin, which is forbidden either of the other, which is the same halacha like a Chetzi Eved Ches Bas Chayin. So they force the owner of the Shivcha Meshachar name and they free both of them, and then either one, they're both regular full-fledged free Jewish men now, and they can get married to regular Israelis. Now, now, if that son was the son of the one that got mixed up with the slave, was the son of the master of the slave itself, and that master dies and he leaves over the son, who he's now the owner of that other boy, and he's mixed up with him, and we don't know who's who. So Kishiglu, when they get older, because you can't free a slave when he's a minor, Yishachar says, and then they quote unquote free each other, because we don't know who's the real master and who's the slave, and then and then they're both permitted to marry into the assembly of the Jewish people. Now, but let's say Hayat Rebbe's Banis. Let's say the mixture of the Jewish mother and the slave woman were actually daughters. Harishtain Sveik Shvachis. Here they're both doubtful if they're maidservants, and here you don't force the master because a woman doesn't have to get married. It's not commanded in Pir. So, V'habal Kol Achsman, if someone has a relation with any one of these women, Havolat Sveik Evan, the child is doubtful as a slave. And Mechen Nesar Vlad Goy B'Vlad Yisrael. So too, if let's say the child of a non-Jewish woman or a child of a Jewish woman get mixed up, yes, again, you immerse both of them for the purposes of conversion, because again, one of them is Jewish and one of them is not. And each one of them is going to be doubtful as a convert, and because again, you don't know who is who, and again, so it shall be forbidden to a Kayin, who's forbidden with a Gieris, but they'll both be Jewish women. And Halachit Zayin Ram continues regarding picking out specifically 4 nations of the world that are different than what we said is the status of the nations of the world when they convert, where that's the Mitzri, Ademi, Amoni, and Mayavi. Says the Ram, Kol HaGoyim Kulam, all the nations of the world, Kishiz Gairu, when they convert, up until we spoke about when they were still not Jewish. When they convert, the Kabbalim, Kol HaMitzvah, they accept upon themselves all the commands of the Torah. And similarly, Vavadim Kishizachu, the slaves when they are freed, Hayim Ki Yisrael Chol Dava, they're like a Jewish person for all halachic purposes. Shnemak says in the Pasuk Midbar, Hakol Chulka Achas Yilchem, the assembly, they're all like one statute that it's for you. And they're permitted to marry into the Jewish people right away. And that is Shisa Ger Oyamashurcha Bas Yisrael. That is the convert or the freed man marries a Jewish woman. The Yisrael Ger is Mashaveres, or that the Jewish man marries the convert or the woman who is freed. Now, however, there's 4 exceptions of the nations of the world. Behem, and they are Ammon, Umayyav, Mitzrayim, Egypt, Edom, and Edom. That from these nations, when someone converts from these nations, you're right, for all practical purposes, the person is the full-fledged Jew. There's one exception regarding marrying into the Jewish people. As Rambam says, what's the halacha? So regarding Ammon and Umayyav, which are near Eretz Yisrael, Issurei. that is a eternal prohibition, specifically Zachar Malayin the Kabers, the males amongst them and not the females. It says in the masculine that the people of Ammon and Moab are not allowed to enter into the marriage into the assembly of the Jewish people. Specifically the males of Ammon and Moab, they're forbidden to ever marry a Jewish woman. Even a great, however, child that is, forbidden up until the end of the world. Now, but the females, they're permitted right away to marry a Jewish man right when they convert. Here, the halacha is both male and female. When they convert, first generation converts and their children are forbidden to marry into the Jewish people. But a third generation is permitted, like it says in the pasuk, that their sons, their children will be born to them, etc., which is over the dar shlishi, they're permitted to marry into the Jewish people. Now, halacha chaf, the Rambam qualifies, says mitzvahs muberish in this guy. If you have a pregnant Egyptian woman that converts, so she's a first generation, her child is a second generation. Now, mitzvah shenish nosim mitzvah rishon. But what happens if you have a second generation mitzvah that marries a first generation Egyptian woman, or the other way around? Mitzvah rishon, a first generation Egyptian man, shenosim mitzvah sheni that marries a second generation Egyptian woman. Havol sheni, here the child is going to be a second generation, not a third generation, because it says in the pasuk, ban mashi bodlem, the sons, the children that will be born to them. Hakasat tlem b'leida, the pasuk makes it dependent on birth, which you can't have birth without a father and a mother, and as long as it's not a third generation to both of them, forbidden to marry into the Jewish people. So here, since one of them is still a first generation, even though one of them is second, the child is going to be only a second generation, not a third generation. Now, halacha chaf aleph. What happens if you have a mixed parenting? What happens if a convert from Ammon marries that of an Egyptian woman? So havalet Ammoni, the child is going to be considered, if the child is a male, is going to be Ammoni and going to be forbidden to marry into the Jewish people forever, because his father is from Ammon. Now, if the child is a daughter, then she'll be like a mitzvah, which will not be permitted right away, will be forbidden up until the third generation, like any mitzvah, whether female or male is, because it will always go stringently. Now, ger mitzvah shenas Ammonis. Let's say you have the man is a Egyptian convert who married, here's the inverse of the other case, where the woman was from Ammon. So here, havolad mitzri, the child will be an Egyptian and will be forbidden up until the third generation, because the father is the more problematic over here, which we're going to go stringent either way, which says Ram Zakal, this is the rule. But umas, by the nations, when they're not Jewish, halacha chazachar, then you go after the male, after the father. So if, let's say an Ammoni guy marries a Goya from a different nation, and they have a son, it's going to be like an Ammoni. When he converts, it's forbidden to marry to the Jewish people. If you have a guy from a different nation that comes in a Goya Ammonis and has a son, he's not an Ammoni. And when he converts, he'll be permitted to marry, because then you go after the father. The Skairu, when they convert, then halacha chapachas, then like we were saying in the beginning, halacha, then you go up to the more deficient. Whichever parent is more problematic, that's the one that the status is going to be flawed based on that parent. Halacha base. Mishneh Skai Meshiba Amaman. Whoever converts from the 7 nations of Canaan, they're not permitted biblically to marry to the Jewish people. Now, Bahadav you do, but it says Rambam, it's known, the only one they converted from the 7 nations of Canaan, when they conquered it, were the Gevainim. Now, Yeshua Gazalem, but Yeshua decreed on them, that although biblically they're permitted, that they should be forbidden to marry to the Jewish people. Whether the males or the females. But he only made them forbidden at a time when there was still a temple, was still a base of Mikdash. Like it says in the pasuk in Yeshua, there'll be wood choppers and water carriers for the house of my God. With Mikdash, he made the fact that they're forbidden to the Jewish people as this lowly job and distance when there was a base of Mikdash. Now, in Halach of Gimel, and they're what's known, and they're quoted in Mishneh and Sefer Ezra as the Nesinim. Why Nesinim? Because they were given over to the service of the Beis Hamikdash. But David came along and he decreed that they should be forbidden to marry the Jewish people forever. Even when there's no Beis Hamikdash. It's explicit in Sefer Ezra. When the Nesinim from the Nesinim that David gave and the princes for the service of the Levium, you learn it wasn't dependent on the Beis Hamikdash anymore. It was for other purposes, like for the Levium, and therefore that's eternal. Why did he and his courts make an eternal decree on the Nesinim, on the Gevanim? Because he saw brazenness and cruelty that was by these people. When they requested that the 7 sons of Shaul HaMelech, the chosen one of Hashem, should be hung and be killed, and they took revenge where they were allowed to because of what happened with that Shaul killed out those people, and they wanted to take revenge, and Hashem let it, and they had no mercy, which is not appropriate for the Jewish people. Therefore, David HaMelech and his court ruled that they should not ever join and marry into the Jewish people. Now, halacha chafei. But says the Rambam, this was all before a certain time in history. When Sancheir, who was the king of Assyria, came along and he conquered the world, and Bilbul Kalumis, and he mixed up all the nations of the world, the Irvim, Zebes, and he mixed them all up. The Heklos Mekam, he exiled everyone from their homeland and brought them to other places. So therefore says the Rambam, the Egyptians that are in Egypt right now, they're not the original Egyptians, they're other people. Also the Dom in the fields of Edom, they're other people. Since these 4 nations, which is nothing compared to the 70 nations of the world, these 4 nations, they got mixed up all the other nations of the world which are permitted, only these 4 are forbidden, so now everyone in the world is permitted. Because whoever is removing from wherever the nation is, doesn't make it where you live, we don't know which nation that means you're from. If they're coming to convert, what's called the parish meruba parish, whatever is detaching itself from the majority, and they're coming to the Jewish people, we presume that's from the majority, and the majority are from the other nations. So therefore, when someone comes to convert from the nation of the world in these days, from any place, whether it's from Edom, or Egypt, or Ammon, or Moab, Ben Kushi, whether from Ethiopia, Ben Sharmas, whether any other nations of the world, whether it's the males or the females, Mutar and Love become a yad, they're permitted to come into the Jewish people immediately.